All right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to MBA Education's How to Leverage Document AI for Unparalleled Efficiency in Loan Production and Loan Servicing webinar. My name is Allison and I will be facilitating today's session. Just a couple of things to note about the Zoom platform. So if you have a question for our speakers, the chat function is disabled. However, you can submit a question or a comment using the Q&A function located at the bottom toolbar. At the end of the webinar, I will have a short survey, so please make sure you stick around for just another minute or so to provide your honest feedback on our webinar today. And just a reminder, this webinar is being recorded and I will send out the link this afternoon in an email. Now I'd like to introduce today's presenters. We have Murali Tirupati, who is the co-founder and CEO at VaultEdge, John Mangaluso, who is the Senior Vice President of Record Services at Ocwen Financial Services, Maynard Honor, who is also a CMB and the Digital Product Management Director at Wells Fargo, and Vishal Chawla, who is the CTO at BSI Financial. And with that, I will hand it over to you, Murali, to get us started.
Great, perfect. Thank you, Allison. Thank you for setting the stage over there. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this webinar on leveraging document AI for unparalleled efficiency in loan production and servicing. Now, when Allison said that title, and even as I'm reading this, I realized that it's a mouthful, right? The entire webinar title. What we are really going to discuss today is how can you use document AI to do a better job in loan production and servicing, right? So that's what this webinar is really all about. My name is Murali, and I'm the co-founder and CEO of VaultEdge Software. And I have about 25 years of experience working with enterprises and helping them improve their operational efficiencies. And I did that using both process changes, process intervention, as well as technology interventions. And I'm really fortunate today to have a really distinguished panel for this discussion. And Maynard, Vishal, John, thank you so much for being on this panel. I would like to invite Maynard to introduce yourself. Maynard?
Thank you. My name is Maynard Honor. I am a CTO and Digital Product Manager at Wells Fargo. I focus a lot on lending. So I've been in the lending industry for the last 30 years.
Great. Vishal, if you can go next.
Hi, everyone. I hope you're ready to experience my voice in all its glory today. Deciding to give my camera off at the day off. But anyway, I work at BSI Financial Services. I lead technology there. And within that, lending, servicing, capital markets are all things that I work on. I am coming from technology product development area for about 30 years now. In the mortgage industry, my experience is a total of about 2 years, but very experienced with these problems that we are going to talk about. I've worked in healthcare and energy, again, where we did lots of initiatives around data and documents and AI.
Great. Thank you, Vishal. Over to you, John.
Hi, my name is John Mangaluso. I'm the Senior Vice President of Record Services. And so in my world, all things imaging and document management, we've done a lot of work with RPA and bots and with VaultEdge to do OCR technology as well. So we are, on the forefront in our company of doing all of the automation processes. So looking forward to hearing what everybody else has to say in questions, see if we can help move the industry forward.
Great. Thank you, John. Thank you. All right. So let's dive right into the discussion. And I want to start with the macro picture, right? Now, what I'm going to talk about is not news to anyone, right? So we are currently in a very high interest rate regime. Fed increased interest rates pretty much continuously for the last several quarters. And today we have one of the highest interest rates ever in terms of the mortgage rates, looking back into the history. And on top of it, there is also a fear of recession all around. And all these things put together are driving the loan volumes down. If you want to look at how severe this problem is, MBA recently published its projections for the loan production volume for 2023. The latest projection says that for 2023, the origination volume is expected to be 20% below the 2022 volume. And before we forget, 2022 itself saw a huge drop in origination volumes compared to 2021. So definitely volumes are down, right? No question about it. And MBA also projects that there will be a mild recession sometime in the mid of this year. Of course, the definitions of recession kind of varies, and there are different metrics to look at. But the overall consensus is that there could be a recession sometime in the middle of this year. Now, both these things are putting, of course, they are driving the volumes down, right? So the drop in volume is a reality. Now, the more interesting and actually the more worrying thing is about now what is happening on the cost front. So if you look at the production, the origination expense, the cost to close a mortgage, the production expense rose to about $13,000 in Q1 2023. And the productivity per FTE is down to just one loan per FTE per month compared to 1.6 loans back in 2018. So over 5 years, we actually dropped from 1.6 loans per FTE to one loan per FTE. And this increase in cost naturally is having a big impact on the overall profitability of mortgage companies. If you look at IMBs, only 1 in 3 IMBs posted any profit at all in the last quarter. And the same number was 98% in 2020. And of course, 2020 was a good year from the mortgage industry. But even if you compare it historically, right now, with only 32% of the companies making any profit, this is actually much lower than historical average. And in fact, on average, if you look at it, IMBs clocked a net loss of close to $2,000 in Q1 2023, right? So it's a pretty kind of difficult situation from a cost and profitability perspective. These are actually what the overall industry metrics, industry surveys are telling us. Now, I want to invite our panelists to really understand what is their point of view. So Maynard, you have a great view in terms of what is happening in the industry from the fact that Wells Fargo is the largest or one of the largest in every market that you operate in, both on lending as well as servicing side. So I would like you to share your point of view on what is happening in the market and what do you see from both volumes, top line and bottom line perspective.
Yeah, so from a personal view standpoint, watching the market here with the MBA, we all see that the origination volumes are trending lower, obviously as the rates trend higher. So that's out in the market. When the market, if we watched when the rates were extremely low, we saw a lot of mortgage activity, whether it was new financing or refinancing that had to be processed, and there was long lead times. If we recall, there were long lead times of working through the backlog, whether it was new origination or refinancing origination. Now that the rates have gone up substantially, so that they're up higher than they have been in a very long time here, the market is adjusting. You see mortgage applications lower. They tend week by week. If you watch week by week on depending what the rate is, they'll go up and down. The one point I would like to make is the processing that it takes to process all of these applications, whether it's new originations or refinancing, takes a lot of personnel. So it takes a lot of employees depending on what your process is. And so as mortgage volume vacillates, which it does, if you look over the last 30 years, it will vacillate. You're tending to have to add more employees during high points to try to keep up with the market and try to keep up with your SLAs on processing. And then when you have low points in the market, you're having to try and remove employees from your structure because the volume's just not there. So the market's not there. So that's just my 2 points I think we'll talk about later. With the AI focus, is just the personnel of having to add people and remove people from your organization as the mortgage origination applications vacillate.
Great points, Maynard. Great points. And yeah, indeed, actually, these are some things I think we will take up further down in this discussion. John, can you add your point of view? Ocwen, of course, is one of the largest servicers in the country. And you also have, origination side business as well. So can you tell us what is your take on the macro picture?
Yeah, I think I totally agree with Maynard, right? So clearly we've seen not only the increase in interest rates, but also a decrease in supply, right? So we're having a twofold effect of, what's driving down the applications. And so when you look at the statistics that you showed in terms of the production expense increasing, so much of that is because your volume has decreased, but your overhead hasn't, right? It's hard to match that volume and your overhead and your fixed cost in terms of people, because even when you reduce loan officers, processors, what have you, you still have all the compliance structure and all, the static overhead that you're, putting that expense over a smaller number of volume. So automation for us is key, as I think it is for most of the industry, right? So the way to reduce, the more you can reduce that fixed overhead for comp and benefits, because for almost every company, your biggest expense is your comp and benefits. So as you're able to reduce that through efficiency and not necessarily have to scale up and scale down so quickly based upon volumes, that makes you more efficient in terms of managing your P&L and your productivity per FTE.
Got it. Vishal, can you add your point of what are you seeing in your business as your take on the market?
Yeah, so nothing. I think John and Maynard covered most of the important things. I think, so the main thing is, the interest rate environment may not be the most favorable right now, but it's also, as John mentioned, there is this fixed things around compliance and regulatory requirements, manual paper-intensive processes, which, never ending, kind of like, almost like, there's so much of that in any given environment that, these require constant communication, coordination, things like that, right? Then there is the, the impact of these rising costs. Obviously, it's an effect where, they affect profitability, and the more we spend on processing, the less profit we make on each mortgage, obviously. And for some, this squeeze of margins is uncomfortable. But this is where I think as we get a little bit more into the presentation, we talk about intelligent automation, and John talked about spiking up, spiking down, or in my mind, automation really, when you think about it, it really helps you flex up and flex down as your needs and demands change, so that these fixed overheads can be kept to a much more predictable level versus dealing with changing market conditions. Right?
Yeah. So absolutely, I think. So John, actually, you addressed that very well. We can't, when we say that production expense rose, it need not be that we are doing much worse. The challenge also is the volume is down and the costs are not really flexing, right? So Vishal, like you're saying, which is actually putting a lot of pressure on the profitability. Now, so one thing is very important, right? So we are in a commoditized, low volume, low profit environment. So with that as a given, for the current market situation, the key question to ask ourselves is, how do you build a cost advantage, right? So there is not a lot of power that lenders and servicers have on the pricing side, on pricing the mortgage rates. So how do you build a cost advantage? Now, I want to actually look at a recent survey that Fannie Mae did. Fannie Mae surveyed several mortgage companies, And there are a couple of very interesting findings from the Fannie Mae survey. One is, if you look at mortgage companies across the board, during COVID, companies invested good amount of efforts into implementing technologies on consumer-facing side, right? So things like digital applications, things like e-closings, things like remote notarization. So companies have actually gone and implemented solutions in those space, which help them a lot in actually keeping the business going and keeping those high volumes, right, happen during that peak. But when it comes to back-end operations, the findings are it has remained largely manual and staffing intensive. So for a specific question that was there in the survey, which is around what are the top cost increase drivers and top cost decrease drivers, the survey found that 49% of the companies said that staffing costs, the back-end operational staff costs, are the biggest cost increase drivers, right? So it is the staffing costs which are pushing up the costs. Now, if you take on the flip side, in terms of what is helping them reduce the costs, the answer was it is investments in back-end process technology. So those companies who invested in back-end process technologies were able to actually see results in terms of lower production costs, right? So this actually puts this picture very stark, right? So staffing, of course, is a must. Our industry is heavily dependent on this, but that is actually the biggest driver of cost increase. And on the other side, technology is actually the biggest driver in terms of cost decrease. So I want to now understand from each of the panelists that we have in terms of what is it that you are doing in your own organizations to address both these things, right? So one is from a people cost perspective, what are the initiatives that you have, which could be on the process side, process and people side, and on the technology side, what is it that you are doing on the technology side to address this? And what is your take on these points? Maynard, if you can start with you.
Sure. Yeah. So across Wells Fargo, we are focused on efficiency gains. So if you look at just overall the top cost increase drivers, one thing from a macroeconomic perspective, whether you have personnel in the United States here or in other locations, we've seen a large increase in the cost of just the back office or any personnel. So there's two things there. There's a inflation factor associated with personnel in general, and that's a macro level. You can look across the economy. Specifically here, if you look in the United States, you can see the large driver of what was inflationary pressure related to cost of staffing and hiring that staff and keeping that staff with you. Also, there's the issue that we see of actually getting qualified staff or enough people to actually fulfill a job. So you can have a lot of positions open. The question, again, macro-wise, a lot of industries are dealing with this, is how you actually fill roles. And are there enough people to fill roles? So I think there's a staffing shortage across a lot of industries that we're seeing. So trying to get things efficient, again, across Wells Fargo, is about efficiency in our processes, how we utilize personnel, all while keeping our risk tolerance. On the decrease drivers, we are spending a lot of money on technology. So there is a focus on technology. We'll get into AI. We have an AI practice here at Wells Fargo, just like major banks do, looking at various components that can give us more business value, in these processes for two things. One is reduce our risk of not having enough personnel to actually, to perform the task or the procedure. That's number one. And two, to reduce the inflationary pressure of trying to have that personnel.
Right. Got it. So John, I know that, Ocwen always has been working towards, efficiencies. I know that Ocwen was one of the earliest companies on the servicing side who have actually these global centers for delivery, right? So what is Ocwen doing in terms of addressing these pressures, the cost pressures on the staffing, and then what are you doing on the technology side?
Yeah, Maynard's point was spot on, right? So we have a global footprint in terms of where our staff is, and so we've certainly taken advantage of the arbitrage of salaries where we can. There's licensing requirements that obviously require us to have both onshore personnel doing certain things as well. So the problem becomes we've seen attrition everywhere, and that inflation in the wages as well. So one of the things that we are clearly trying to do is stay ahead of that curve by relying on human beings to do things that we can't get technology to do, and we're trying to reduce that footprint. So one of the metrics we look at is the number of loans handled per FTE from a servicing perspective, and we've been able to see that number increase. So use of chatbots and voice bots, RPA, trying to take out, OCR, trying to take out the repetitive tasks from somebody and have them step in either where the technology sort of runs into a roadblock, or you end up in a situation where we just don't have that decision making yet in the technology, right? And so one of the things we're trying to look to get towards is to have the various different technologies talk to each other, so things flow from one piece to another, and can start to use more of that AI platform to make some more of the decisions and have those decisions then checked by people, so that we reduce the need for that staffing, because it has become a global problem in order to retain staff. And there's a huge cost, not only in having the staff, but just being able to recruit and then retain them. So every time somebody leaves, your efficiency drops, and then you have the instance of trying to replace them. We also find that people who are more engaged in more detailed tasks as opposed to static repetitive tasks are a more engaged workforce. So if we can get the technology to do the repetitive tasks, people are more engaged and happier with what they're doing and tend to have a longer longevity with the firm.
I think that's a great point, the last thing that you actually mentioned. So a lot of times people talk about technology from the point of view of cost and from the point of view of scale, but an equally important angle of that is employee retention. So like you rightly said, if you're actually having people in a mundane, repetitive task, it's a lot more difficult to retain that employee and keep that person motivated, right? So I think that's actually a great angle that comes in from tech perspective. Vishal, I would like to hear your views also, and I also want to know how are you looking at the process and technology side of things?
Look, strategically, going last, I'm happy to hear, John and Maynard's view. I think generally, these serve as validations for what we are doing. But, I feel like, these are exciting times as well, right? We're at a point where we can seriously transform the way we work in the industry. And it boils down to really, in my mind, 3 things, right? It's thinking out of the box, it's embracing technology, and making our processes more digital, right? And John and Maynard both touched upon these things. Paperwork, we all know, right? Manual processing, this can be a slog up, absolutely, isn't it? So not only does it eat up a lot of time, it also tends to be more prone to errors. And yes, it can actually put a dent in our wallets as well. Look, I mean, the other thing, this slide actually hits too close to home for me. So like I mentioned earlier, my first experience in mortgage and, this operations started about 2 years ago. So I came in cold, and since the last year or so, we've been in this sort of massive transformation, servicing ops transformation. And we started this effort, and going in, the sort of the most gut feeling was that, hey, technology everywhere, and that's the answer, right? Well, lo and behold, as we sort of got a little bit more into it, and did the sort of a detailed analysis of what are the drivers, as we look at the cost pyramid, that cost per loan, this hits so close to home. I think this is in the right zip code, right? So this is good, which was different from how we initially thought about it, right? And then, when I first came on, one of the other things, I was looking at operations because I wanted to experience firsthand how, post processing is done. And outside in, my view was, you all have seen Office Space, right? I mean, there is a point in the movie where Peter, who's the main guy in the movie, he's talking about how he actually does about 15 minutes of real work in a given week, right? And that's a laugh, right? At that, because it's close to home, obviously, within the operation, right? Highlights how inefficient processes can lead to disengaged employees. That's John's point as well, right? In our industry, this actually might look like spending hours manually checking and verifying documents, leaving little time for real work, such as decision making, right? Is in my mind, that's it's very wasteful. There's a lot of waste in the industry, in the processing. That in the movie they talk about these TPS reports, right? And it's funny. I mean, I can't get away from that picture in my mind, right? Disgruntled Peter, and here now, we have army of disgruntled Peters in any given organization, right? And automation and digitization, these are keys to empowering employees to be doing real work, real decision making, right? So that they are comfortable, they are empowered, and leading to better outcomes. I think there's my experience is generally in line with what John and Maynard said as well.
Yeah. So that movie definitely brings back, a laugh to me. I mean, I remember that movie very well. So Vishal, you actually, when we, for this point, when we started talking, you actually said that these are exciting times, right? So, and I think that's exactly what I expected from you being a eternal optimist. And in fact, that is something that I see across mortgage industry. I think people who are in the mortgage industry, I think we can't be here unless we are like, super optimistic, right? With all the ups and downs over here. So that's another big takeaway for me from what you just said. Now, so we have talked about how technology is very important in terms of bringing in operational efficiencies, right? And we want to now talk about a specific technology, which is document AI, and how this is impacting operational cost and operational efficiencies. A lot of times, when I talk to customers, so at Voltage, we provide document AI solutions to the mortgage industry. And a lot of my discussions with my customers start with, hey, what do we really mean by document AI, right? So there are a lot of terminologies that are thrown around. So the way I see it is document AI is not just, OCR, it's not just data capture, or it's not just RPA. It is about, the various artificial technologies that we can use on top of documents to enable decision making. So when we actually approach a use case, a business problem, that is how we see it. It's not about how do I scrape some data from a particular document. It's really about how can I use, this multiple tools that we have, within the AI space for documents for a better decision making. And I actually have a few use cases which kind of expand the horizon of what is possible in this space. But first, I want to invite the panelists here to talk about it. So, John, when I say document AI, or when I say intelligent document processing, what comes to your mind? John, can you hear me?
Sorry, a little bit of technology problem. Sorry. You can hear me now?
Yes.
So,
yes.
so we started with Vault Edge down this path, several years ago, starting with, OCR, and we've sort of gone through all of those buckets: OCR, data capture, RPA, and now we are moving into the AI. And so for us, at first, it was just extracting that data. We now have multiple systems that essentially talk to each other, starting with receipt of documents, indexing those documents, pulling data off of those documents, comparing that data to our system of record, and then causing actions to be taken based upon that data comparison. So for us, this continuation of making multiple systems talk to each other and workflows just sort of kicking themselves off. And then an exception process where if something doesn't match or doesn't flow through, then gets kicked out to that human intervention piece. So that's allowed us to become exceptionally much more efficient when we're dealing with documents, converting it to data that then is able to be used in our servicing platform. And then feeds our website, our billing cycles, all of that, fairly untouched for the vast majority of it. But we still have a long way to go when it comes to decision making for us. The things that, as a servicer, one of the things we deal with a lot, obviously, is particularly as the economy is getting worse, is modifications. And so being able to have that decision making made from documents, smart documents submitted by the customer, and moving those through underwriting engines and such is sort of our next step in terms of where we're looking to go.
Got it. Maynard, I want to ask you. You have experience, not only on residential side, even commercial side, and being part of Wells Fargo, you have seen what is happening, even outside mortgage. So how do you see, what do you put under document AI? What are the different use cases, different technologies that you have seen under the broad umbrella of document AI?
Yeah, so under document AI, just as you noted here, it isn't just about OCR, data capture, and RPA, although those are key technologies that can be highly leveraged if you're able to utilize from a document perspective and digitized document, including the AI. So AI is really for us, it is, making sure you can get the information off, whether it's how to use OCR, data capture. Again, RPA is another good. I think everybody, like here at Wells, we leverage RPA, but it's also creating the models and kind of the AI component and focusing on what we're trying to do with AI. So it's whether it's looking at specifically, managing how you're taking intake on, let's say, documenting income or trying to do credit analysis, both like Resi on the commercial side, it's done too, whether you're trying to bring in documents that capture income and financial statements of like commercial borrowers, same components. You can capture all that data. How do you use models to do decisioning? And figure out something. And as John said, maybe you have someone check over that, but the initial work, like the work that is I would say the rudimentary work that has to be done is getting done using AI technologies. And then you're using your people, which are your most valuable asset, for high value activities. but that's how we have, you know, from an AI perspective, a lot of different AI models and focuses on documents specifically. I would say a lot of it is, you know, looking at, like, from an income perspective, a financial statement perspective, you know, how you're trying to bring that in quickly, make decisions rather quickly. Sometimes we're getting documents or reading documents and having AI models go through those documents, looking for certain things.
Got it. Got it. So Vishal, I want to request you to kind of, give us some perspective even beyond mortgage industry, right? So you've been on the technology side at the forefront of tech for a long time, and even before you got into mortgage space. So how do you see document AI kind of working across industries, and are there things that we can actually leverage, borrow from other industries over here?
Look, I was going through the chat and somebody asked the question, how is document AI different from conventional OCR as we know it, right? So let me, I guess, answer that question first. So OCR is actually the backbone of document AI in my mind. The document AI use cases, as OCR is actually essential to transform the text into something which is understandable by a computer, right? And that's the key part of it, right? Semantic understanding of documents, right? Something, OCR, while it might extract something as like a blob of text, document AI models actually turn into something which you can actually deal with as an entity within the system. Let's say an address or a borrower name or an SSN and so on, right? So that's the big difference, right? And the use cases are sort of in mortgage, very, very interesting use cases. We tend to use a lot in servicing area, right? And outside of it, we did some early versions of this in healthcare as well, where again we had all these, let's say, radiology reports and X-rays and things of that nature. You'd look at those, or doctor notes was a big thing, transcribing doctor notes and then looking for intelligence or what was being said, doctor notes, who can read those, right? but anyway, I mean the use cases are, in mortgage or any of this document centric industry, right? Financial, fintech, healthcare, any of these industries where documents are used a lot, there is a place for document AI, right? So the way I actually look at it says, about 20 years ago, 25 years ago, when you used to travel to a foreign country, you'd carry some sort of like a translation, like a little pocket dictionary or something like that, right? Pocket dictionary, obviously, we all now know the shortcomings of that, right? It is just verbatim, word for word translation and, missing any kind of local context and so on, right? And that's what document AI is doing on top of that. It is ascribing context to these documents, all the way from classifying, identifying what the documents are, to actually extracting data from these documents, and then pushing those over into your business processes, and then actually decisioning off of those things. So, right, I mean, John hit the nail on the head, right? So as the first step is, hey, let's make sure that all of this is actually integrated into our business processes, and then we layer in the intelligence to react on top of it, bring the reactivity to say, okay, how do we now put some intelligence on it, and so on, right? So these use cases are obviously not limited to mortgage. They're bound everywhere.
Yeah. And Vishal, thanks for actually taking that question and addressing, hey, how document AI is different than conventional OCR. And that question again, gets asked to me a lot of lot of times. And your analogy is great, right? As opposed to looking at a dictionary and then trying to figure out a meaning, you really need to understand the context and the overall picture when you're trying to translate, right? The same thing applies here as well. Now, some of the more concrete ways I can explain the difference between traditional OCR versus document AI is that traditional OCR works very well when you have standard templates and standard forms, because traditional OCR is based on a template-driven approach. It's based on keywords, where the software is expecting certain keywords and software is expecting certain data in certain places in the document, right? But in mortgage, we know that we have many documents where we either don't have a format at all, it's completely unstructured, or you literally have tens of thousands of formats. So you take insurance documents. There are probably 10,000 plus companies out there. Each of them have their own format for the HOI insurance policy that they issue. You take a deed of trust or a mortgage or a note. These are completely unstructured documents. Traditional OCR can't handle these documents. The new generation document AI solutions can handle these. But also, it is not just about document recognition and data extraction, right? So for the last 5 years, we've been providing software at Voltage to automate document recognition, data extraction, and income analysis. But now we are working on even the next set of use cases. We are building prototypes now. I mean, we have some solutions currently in prototype stage where we are building on top of GPT-4, essentially the generative AI models, using which you can ask questions to your loan file, right? Like, let us say you have a loan file. It could be a closed loan file. And an underwriter can ask a question to that loan file saying, hey, would this loan be eligible for a loss mitigation process as per my guidelines, right? As per my company policy. So what you're really asking the software to do is understand the loan file, understand your policy document, put them together, and then give an answer, right? We are actually building chatbots in the area of, all of you must know that there is something called Ask Polly for Fannie Mae, but there is nothing equivalent to that for Freddie Mac, Ginnie Mae, or VA loans, etc. We are building a chatbot where you can actually ask questions to Freddie Mac seller servicer guide and get answers, right, using this chatbots. So those are some of the new use cases, and I'm sure actually the client industries will come up with a lot more use cases like this in terms of leveraging document AI. I want to drill a little deeper on the document AI topic. Now, looking specifically at lending and servicing separately, right? So we have, on this panel, we have people both from lending and servicing side. So I want us to drill down and look at what are the areas where the panelists have implemented these solutions on lending and servicing. Now let us look at lending side. So on the lending side, you have a process which looks like you start with the loan application, it goes to loan processing, underwriting, closing, post-close QC, etc. And each of these business processes are great use cases for intelligent document processing or document AI. So John, I would like you to weigh on this. I actually want to start with Maynard. Maynard, I want you to speak about in the loan production lifecycle, where do you see maximum application for document AI current in terms of what you have implemented currently and as well as in terms of where you want to invest?
The document AI is used and can be used across almost all the life cycle here, as you noted. I think there's a lot of document AI that's focused on like the loan application process, going through underwriting. I mean, trying to get to a quicker close and getting all the processing done leads to a better client engagement, so our customer engagement, and leads to better results. If you can get through that process to get to an answer back to the customer quicker. So whether it's processing the documents again from the automated, again, income verification, just working on items like that to get answers back quicker is important to the customer. I would state too that we're seeing there's some items that are coming into play because of what's happening out in the market, things like LIBOR cessation. So LIBOR cessation ends June 30th, so it's in a few days here. There's a lot of documents that we had to do specifically on the commercial side, which is just really loan processing, is we had to read through a lot of unstructured documents looking for keywords and setting up ways of analyzing phrases and terminology in some part of sometimes maybe a 300-page document to be able to pull out information to understand our capabilities inside of a document to manage movement from LIBOR to a SOFR or a different alternative reference rate product.
Right. Yeah, so that's a use case that comes up quite often in my discussions, the whole LIBOR use case. And under the origination side, you actually talked about how the software can pick up documents from other systems, right? And this is something that I think is very, very critical. Even as we talk about document AI, we need to remember that the source for a lot of these documents is a different system. So typically, most of these documents originate in the LOS. So one of the key things that customers look for in this particular space, and what at Voltage we have actually done a lot of work in terms of addressing, is how do you integrate with the LOS systems, right? So today, for example, Voltage integrates out of the box with Encompass to automatically pick documents that are coming into there, and applying AI on it, identifying the documents, and then pushing them back into the LOS system. I think that is very, very important, right? So in some of these processes, that is very important, but in some of the other cases, like if you take, for example, post-close, where companies are using document AI solutions for things like post-close audit or TRID compliance check, etc., you can use document AI solutions on a standalone basis as well, right? So integration into something like an LOS may not be as critical over there. And that is a very, very important element that one would want to consider. Now, in the interest of time, I actually want to go to the next slide, which is around document AI in loan servicing lifecycle, right? So we are talking about loan boarding, MSR transfers, servicing QC, etc. So John, I know that you've been using document AI technologies for 4 years with Voltage, but I know that you've been kind of working on these technologies even before that. So can you tell us what are the different areas where you are using OCR, IDP, document AI in your business?
Yeah, we're actually, again, similar to what Maynard said, basically across all of these. And so it started for us in the loan boarding space slightly before we started our partnership with you, and you helped us enhance that. But so the reading of documents, pulling of data off of those documents, matching it up with the MSR information that we got from the prior servicer or the prior MSR owner. So taking all of that stare and compare out of the system, and then having an exception process. Where we're moving to now is much more in the loss and default servicing areas, where we're able to pull that information off of the origination packages in terms of what their situation was financially, what their current financial situations are, and then actually using the AI to come up with alternative solutions in terms of, we have a variety of options depending upon what type of loan and how you could modify a loan, or what your loss mid strategy would be, and sort of coming up with a waterfall through that AI process of what the options would be, so that when it comes time to have that conversation with the consumer, we have a list of options that the information has already guided us to, and we can sort of go through that waterfall of what we think would be the best processes for them to go through, but provide them with those options. So doing that in a much more automated fashion than what we had before in terms of looking at all of that data and crunching it into what the options are.
Got it. So the human in the loop process, right? So the software does a good piece of work, but you still want, your users to actually, work on top of it, right? Yeah, that's a great.
Yeah, we sort of describe it, to our staff is that, the technology is sort of the detective doing all the legwork and then brings back all the evidence, and you get to be the judge, right, of what to do with the gathering of all of the evidence, right? So being able to go back and look into what the original underwrite was, what the original situation was, and then look at the information that a borrower is now submitting to you to see, what those options are. So letting the, AI gather all of that information from multiple systems, multiple records, and then being able to look at how we want to decision that.
Got it. So John, can I ask you to share, of course, while tech is great, but ultimately it needs to kind of, impact certain business KPIs, right? So can you tell us, what kind of lift you have seen on your business KPIs, right? Could be headcount, could be, turnaround times, it could be about scaling, etc. What kind of lift you have seen by using Voltage as well as other document AI technologies?
Yeah, so all of that. So, everybody always, I think, immediately goes to, so how much headcount did you take out, right? And so we've certainly been able to do that in a multiple of ways in terms of taking out headcount. But we've redeployed a lot of that headcount to doing more decision-making process. For us, the biggest gain, I think, is the efficiency in terms of time. So, for instance, when we take in a portfolio and we're looking at documents, certainly we need much less manual intervention because of the technology of being able to index those and extract data. But the bigger advantage, in my opinion, in terms of being able to reduce the headcount is the speed with it that's been able to be done, right? So, I don't have the statistics at hand, but roughly I can tell you that if we were looking at bringing in a portfolio of documents, it could take us, several, months to go through all that if we had to manually attribute that. Now we can do that in a matter of days, right? And so the time save that allows us, so it's a big headcount reduction, certainly, but it's a far bigger impact in terms of how quickly you're able to get to other business workflows. And if you've got bad data, you're able to recognize that before you're getting into any servicing errors or lending decision errors because you received incorrect data from prior servicer or prior MSR owner. So the fact that the speed at which you're able to do that, to me, is a far bigger lift than necessarily the reduction in headcount. And then we've seen besides that, we've also seen a reduction in error because the number of manual touches is reduced, right? And so the fewer times you're manually having to touch something, humans and any technology has error rates, right? But the more times you're touching something, the more you're introducing that error risk, right? So the fewer times that we have to touch it, so we're taking out that error risk as well. So not only have we reduced, headcount, our SLA times have increased dramatically, and our error rates have dropped. So it's the combination of all those that just make us. So when we talk about efficiency, I think it's all of those things, not just any one of those.
Got it. So Vishal, we've been working with BSI Financial for more than 3 years now, and I'm personally working with you for more than 2 years. And I can say that for your size, right, for the size of the company, BSI I see as investing a lot in terms of technology, right? So in terms of improving operations compared to other companies of similar size, I see there is so much actually more that you are putting into the whole operational efficiencies, technology investments, etc. So can you share some inputs, insights into what are the different areas where you have implemented technology on the servicing side, and what kind of KPI impact you have seen?
Sure. So John touched upon loan boarding, MSR transfers. So that's right in line with that. He was talking about reduction in time. That's clearly one of the benefits is the processing efficiency around doing certain things, right? And then he also talked about reducing document-related errors, right? That's the other big thing, right? So you have some internal KPIs around it, and right, and less about headcount because we were, whatever we were, we continue to be lean still. It's again my analogy earlier about empowered users and more intelligent decision making. Rather than just people, stare and compare moving widgets and so on and so forth, right? So I think that whole aspect around processing efficiency gains. This is the kind of thing that we look at our internal KPIs on our operational dashboards and so on. I would say something around a 30% efficiency gain is something, right? We look at that deploying these technologies. And then the other servicing QC is our second line of defense in operation. That's the other place where we are deploying technology heavily, right? This is in the way we look at it is like it's sort of like your annual health check, right? Today, when you think about it, your annual screening with the doctor, checking your vitals, making sure everything's shipshape, right? But in our minds, QC is not just about fixing errors, after they happen. It's about preventing them in the first place. So we are actually weaving QC functions directly into our daily operations, shaping a very proactive self-fixing system, right? It's all about combining this vigilance with action. And then this is also where document AI comes into place, through sort of automated checks on documents meticulously, like, almost like proofreading documents sort of thing, right? And doing this in a compliant, regulatory compliance sort of way. It's like having a dedicated compliance officer that reduces your risk of non-compliance almost, right? The other aspect of it is like this is done in all, because I talked about, what I said earlier, this is all being done in real time, right? Quality control can happen, on the go, allowing us to catch and fix issues fairly much right away, right? And internally we've got, some technology that we are deploying now that allows us to do these sorts of things, right? And then obviously using resources more efficiently, right? You can leave it to these technologies to take out the, I guess the, mundane, as you said earlier, and rely on them for their expertise, expert decision making versus just, moving widgets, right? So I think I haven't, I haven't dealt with last minute and default servicing quite yet. Those are other things that are, on the deck, but, only so much at a time, I guess.
Got it. So I know that we are almost at the top of the hour. Alison, I just want to make sure, I want to check with you that if we can stay back a few minutes to address the questions that we got on the Q&A panel. But I want to actually go to the next, and pretty much I think the last slide, where I think this is very, very important for the audience here, because a lot of the audience here have questions around how do we, evaluate, OCR / document AI / IDP projects, right? So all of you here, so John, Maynard, Vishal, you have been through this process for, you're going through this process now, and you have been doing this for several years now. So my question to you here is, how should one go about identifying use cases for intelligent document automation within one's enterprise? And number two, how do you evaluate those projects? So Maynard, if you can take that question first.
Yeah, sure. So we value at Wells Fargo, we look at business value of what we're doing, and we also look at risk and implementation. So specifically when you're looking at from our perspective, my perspective from Document AI, you would look for specifically something that you're trying to get higher value, but a low risk of adoption, because you need some success. And now, obviously, as having done this for a while with other banks, is you got to get some success right away and make sure that you're not trying to do everything at one time, but you're focused on a successful high business value outcome and then build from there, and make sure that you have use cases that provide business outcome and don't get too complex to the point where you can't actually measure the business value of the outcome.
Got it. I think that's a great point. I mean, I'm just paraphrasing: quick wins over big wins. I think that's a great point. Thank you. John, how do you evaluate these use cases? How do these use cases come to you, and how do you evaluate your initiatives and projects?
Yeah, so I'll give you another phrase. So we look at it often, don't let perfect get in the way of good, right? So we look for things that are iterative improvements, right? So we're always looking for a rate of return so that something pays for itself in a year. We frequently survey our staff of what are your pain points? What are the repetitive tasks that are, cause you the most difficulty? So we're looking for where we can either, and that pain point could either be for our staff or for our consumer, right? So where are we getting the most complaints, whether the complaints are internal or external from our partners? So where are those pain points? And we try to alleviate those as best as we can. And then believing that it's an iterative process, right? That we're never going to find the perfect solution. The perfect is the goal, but you're never going to achieve it, right? So we want to make sure that we do something that's good, that's measurable, that has relative ease of implementation, because the people required to implement something have a day job per se, right? So you want to make sure that you can implement it without overtaxing people, so that it doesn't seem like it's a monumentous amount of work for little return, right? So you need to have that buy-in of, it's a relatively easy implementation. You can see what the benefit is going to be in a relative short period of time. It's going to take out some of the friction in that place, and then we can build on those quick wins, and do a constant state of improvement. So you have version 1, version 1.2, right? And you're just continually looking in terms of how to get it better. So we often look at, even if we don't get to version 1.2, was version 1 successful enough that standalone it was worth doing? And so that's sort of the criteria that we used, to evaluate things out of the gate.
Got it. So don't wait for the perfect solution. Start with a good solution and understand that it's an iterative process. Great. Vishal, what is your framework to evaluate Document AI projects?
Not very different from what's already been said. I mean, I tend to, look any sort of technology that we deploy. ROI and KPIs are a key part of, sort of that overall feasibility, right? It tends to be in Document AI, there tends to be, enough nuance around accuracy, processing time, operational cost, efficiencies, and things of that nature, right? So in my mind, I think, as we roll the things out, or, I even more than like speed to market, I tend to, want to be able to pilot things, right? Almost like, hey, take 3 weeks. Let's demonstrate that this is a viable solution for what we are trying to do, right? Other than, that definitely that quick wins, put some wins on the board, get some sponsorship behind larger initiatives. I think that's right on the money for me as well. Technology, evaluating the solution, I guess, including its ability to handle, like in case of Document AI, handling different doc types, integrating with your existing systems, workflows, things of that nature, right? And then the other very important thing in my mind is looking at the customizability and the training capabilities as well, right? I want to be able to look at, the AI's ability to learn from specific documents and processes. The value of, in my mind, document AI lies in its ability to, adapt to unique needs and grow smarter over time, right? And grow consistent and smarter.
Yeah, I think that couple of points, from what you mentioned are really great. So one is about, can you pilot really quick? I think this is something that that all lenders and servicers should keep in mind. How quickly can you pilot something? I think that's a great point. And second, also, okay, the software right now is actually, let us say, at 80% level compared to what you have. Is the software learning and improving over a period of time? I think that's again very, very important. And in Voltage, we have taken that, both these points, to heart. So we have customers who have gone live in like 4 weeks time. We have customers who have piloted the solution within a 1 week time. And the entire feedback loop is very, very inherent to Voltage and even some of the other solutions as well. And that is something that you really want to look for. And we processed about 1 billion pages so far, right? So if someone asks, hey, how do you kind of get this accuracy? It's because the software learned over these billion opportunities, right? So every time when our customers actually processed the documents and the loans through our software, and they do that exception handling, the software is learning from it. And definitely, I think that's a great point. That's something that you really want to look for in the solution that you're picking. I think we covered a lot of ground and some really amazing points. And thank you so much, Maynard, John, Vishal. I can see your experience, right, coming out in the insights that you shared. I want to take maybe a few minutes to look at the questions that we have, address them before we wrap it up. Okay. I'm looking at the Q&A panel. We have Mark Hernandez. His question is, I'm looking for a platform that does predictive analytics on loan structuring and qualification for applications on the front end. Is the group aware of any companies doing that? So, I'll open this to all three of you. So are there solutions that you have seen in the market which can be used on the front end, right? So probably at a loan officer level, maybe, which can help in loan structuring and qualification?
Unfortunately, not that I'm aware of.
Okay, so I have something in mind, but I want to hear from you, Maynard. Are there solutions that you looked at or using or at least considering in this space? So while Maynard actually, looks at it, so we have, one of the solutions that we have is Voltage Income Analyzer, which helps you analyze the income of a borrower, both salaried and self-employed. And we have seen customers using it and piloting it at loan officer level. So typically, income underwriting is something that happens once you have the loan application and it goes to your underwriter. But we have seen customers using the same Voltage Income Analyzer on the front end at the loan officer level. So the idea is the loan officer is sitting across the table with a borrower, and particularly on self-employed borrower side. So they're sitting across the table with a self-employed borrower. The borrower is actually giving a bunch of documents. These are typically, the company's 1040s, a Schedule C of 1040, or the company tax returns like 1120S, or the company bank statement. And instead of actually, without really knowing whether the guy qualifies or not, run it by the solution and look at what the income analysis is saying, and then advising the borrower in terms of what makes sense or what doesn't make sense. There are also other solutions over here, which are coming up in the non-QM space, where you look at a loan file, and and then put that information across the hundreds of parameters that you have on the non-QM side to filter out what could be the 3-4 applications, or rather 3-4 loan programs where the borrower may qualify, right? So that is another piece of technology options that are out there. So yes, there are some areas like that, Mark. So probably I can actually share some information on that, both in terms of what Voltage is doing, as well as some of the other options that are out there with you. So I'm just trying to see what are the other questions where we may not have addressed. Yeah, so the second question that I have is, has Mismo looked at a standardized AI data transfers, or do we expect different, providers, solution providers like Voltage, or essentially, do we need to live with proprietary solutions here? I have a point of view, but I want to hear from John. John, do you have a take on this? Do you think Mismo is coming up with any standard for, particularly on the loan boarding side, data transfers? How do you see that playing?
I can't speak for Mismo, so I don't know what they're looking at. I can say that clearly from Mismo has a standard document set, right, which not everybody follows anyway, right? So it gives you a rough framework, and I think that we certainly see from transfers, particularly like servicing system to like servicing system, that the data is standardized when you're transferring from unlike systems. There's always a mapping exercise. I don't think that we're going to end up with a standard AI product, so to speak. I think the underlying data is more likely to be standardized, and then different companies are going to want to use that data in different ways, right? So what my organization versus what Maynard's and versus somebody else's wants to do with that data may be very different. And so how you want to deploy the actual AI portion of the programming could be very different. And I think that's where there's going to be competition amongst software providers in terms of coming up with those creative solutions. I think the underlying data, however, the sooner as an industry we get to standardization of data and standardization of forms, that's going to help us, then come up with your own sort of secret sauce to AI in terms of how do you deploy that data. So I still think there's going to be that creativity portion of, organizations coming up with how they want to use information and data. But I think the standardization is going to be important for us, whether it's through the MBA or Mismo or other organizations, to standardize the underlying data and the underlying documents as we progress. You said earlier, Murali, that, we have dozens of different types of the same deed of trust and the same, and some of that is just regulatory overhang from, different states and organizations, but over time we need to move forward with that and standardize the documents, standardize the data, and then how you use that will be where the difference will come from.
Right, got it. Yeah, I agree with you on that, John. So Mismo actually has a working group for standardizing loan boarding process, at least to come up with a standard process and data definition for MSR transfers for loan boardings. It is currently work in progress, and but my personal view is standards will actually follow solutions, right? Because you will see solutions like Voltage, who are already solving this problem, even become more valuable, and I think standards will actually will follow that. That is my view. The other question that I see here is Document AI truly evolved to provide 100% automated decisioning support to underwriters? Anyone of you want to take this question? I could be biased, so I don't want to answer this. Maynard, what do you think? All right, so let me take this question. So I don't think, they are evolved enough to provide 100% automated decisioning. And I think we will not be in that situation anytime in the near future for two reasons. One is in terms of the complexity of the problem itself, right? It's a very complex problem. In terms, underwriting is a very complex problem. And I don't think we are at a stage where it can be 100% automated. And the second is regulation, right? So the current regulation, because of the way the current regulation is written, you can't use these solutions in a fully automated manner without running into some risk, right? So you need to be able to explain your underwriting decision. And some of these technologies, particularly in the generative AI space, etc., it's difficult to explain your decision, right? So you do want to have a human involvement over there to kind of make sense of the decision and being able to convey that to the user, right? To the borrower. So for those two reasons, I don't think, we will have 100% automation for underwriting in the near future. So I think those are the different questions that we have. Okay, great. Actually, somebody posted here a link from Mismo on this topic. So we can actually look at this, share this as part of the notes that we share with everyone, with all the audience. Okay. So I think that brings us to the end of the questions as well as our discussion. So Alison, over to you.
All right, thank you so much, Murali. So as I mentioned, we have some post-webinar questions, if you wouldn't mind.
Sure, let's actually take a few minutes.
I'm sorry?
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no. Yeah, so if our attendees wouldn't mind filling out our post-webinar polling questions, we would greatly appreciate your feedback. And as I mentioned, the webinar was recorded and it will be emailed out to everyone following the webinar. Also, our panelists' contact information will also be included in that email. So if you have any further questions, please do feel free to reach out to them. So with that, we will end the webinar, and I hope everyone has a great rest of their day. Thank you to Voltage for a very informative webinar.
Thank you so much, Alison. So as the attendees are filling up that survey, I want to take the opportunity once again to thank Maynard, John, and Vishal. Thank you so much for joining this panel and great insights. I really enjoyed this discussion. In fact, there are a lot of learnings even for me personally from what you have said. And we've been fortunate enough to work with some of you, over the last several years at Voltage. And I think the insights that you shared will help everybody that kind of has attended this panel discussion. Thank you so much for joining this panel. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care, everybody.